Morning, New Life. How are you? Are you glad to be here today? I want you to turn to somebody around you right now and say, you look absolutely fabulous. You look absolutely fabulous. All the singles in the church are loving this moment. Great to have you here and folks joining us online all over the world, including my son Jim. God love him, sick with the flu. Gosh. And good to have folks joining us just everywhere here around the world. It's just great to have you here. Today's an exciting day because two things. One, we're going to do Holy Communion together in just a few minutes and at the end of our service. And it's a time of just healing and reflection and God meeting with us. So I'm looking forward to that with you. But it's also a special day because, as Camilla said, it's Jim's, my son's, 36th birthday. And as most parents, no matter how old your kids get, you always want to show pictures of your kids. So I brought a few today. There's Jim as a baby. And then this next one, oh, look at that face. He's so innocent then. And then he gets married to Miss Camilla, beautiful. And then this is the most recent, just recently we watched the Raiders get beat by the Chargers, and it was awesome. So last week, if you were here, you know we began a new series on family, and we talked about how do you build people up in your family. If you weren't here, you need to watch that. You really do. How do you build people up in your family? Today, I want to spend a few moments talking to you about how do we overcome the fears in our families. How do we overcome the fears in our families? And I want to spend a few moments talking about the first family. No, not Donald and Melania. I want to talk about Adam and Eve. You know, God, when he created Eve, he had to create her, and here's a couple reasons why. First of all, God worried that Adam would frequently become lost in the garden because he knew that Adam would never ask for directions. Any of you ladies agree with that one there? Another reason why God created Eve is this. God knew that someday Adam would require someone to locate the remote control for him. That is what bugs me about Lydia, because I cannot find the remote, and she'll come and go, it's right there, silly. Hate that. Also, God created Eve because God knew if the world was to be populated, the man would never be able to handle the pain level of it, so he needed a woman for that. Now, that's the truth. The human race would be extinct if us men had to have babies. And then lastly, top reason God created Eve is God knew Adam would need someone to buy him some new Fruit of the Loom fig leaves when his wore out, because he would never go to Walmart and buy him for himself. I want to spend a few moments talking about a different kind of fig leaf, another kind of cover-up, and that's emotional fig leaves. In our families, so many times we're just really afraid to become honest about our emotional life with each other. In fact, if you were to ask me, James, what would you say is one of the number one ingredients of a great family? I would say this word, authenticity. That in our families, we learn to become honest, forthcoming. We learn to become genuine in our relationships and honest people speaking the truth in love. In fact, I want you to read with me the opening verse, Ephesians 4:15. Ready, go. Let our lives lovingly express the truth in all things, speaking truly, dealing truly, and living truly. I want you to underline the phrase, lovingly express the truth. Lovingly express the truth. But here's what some experts told Lydia and I, like, say, 20 years ago. That if you're going to have a functional family instead of a dysfunctional family, there's three things that you do. It's talk, feel, and trust. We talk, feel, and trust appropriately. So dysfunctional families, if you get a dysfunctional family, we don't talk honestly. We're not candid when we talk. We don't trust appropriately. We either trust too much or we don't trust at all. And then in our feelings, we just generally stuff them down or we express them in a wrong way. So we got to learn how to be honest with our heart, our feelings, our soul, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. Now, let me ask you something. What do you think is the number one negative emotion in our families? The number one negative emotion? If I told you fear, would you agree with me? Fear. I really believe that I've watched it for a lot of years in families, including my own. It's the fear of not being honest, the fear. We're going to talk about this today. Now, back in the beginning of time when Adam and Eve began their relationship, they had the perfect relationship. They're in paradise. They don't have any kids. That lowers their stress. They have no in-laws. That sure enough lowers their stress. They're naked. They don't have to worry about clothes. Woohoo! All the dudes said hallelujah. No bills to pay. They had the perfect relationship. Everything's going well until sin entered into their relationship. And once sin entered into the relationship, then fear came into the relationship. And that's exactly when the relationship began to deteriorate. So today I want to talk about 3 specific fears in our relationships, in our families, that we really need to overcome if we want healthy, functional families. So if you're taking notes, you may want to jot them down. Of course, you'll never need them, but somebody around you probably will. Number 1, overcome my fear of my faults. My faults. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I just hate to be honest about my faults. That I have a problem, that I have an issue. And what we end up doing, we become afraid of these faults, to express them. And when we do, here's what ends up happening. We have this fear of exposing them, so we either do one of 2 things. We accuse or excuse. It's what Adam and Eve did in Genesis chapter 3. Way back in the beginning, it says, God asked, did you eat what I told you to eat? Does that sound like most parents with their kids? Did you just do what I told you not to do? Did you eat what I told you not to eat? Adam answered, the woman you put here with me gave me the fruit and I ate it. She replied, the snake tricked me into eating it. Do you see accusing and excusing? We accuse our mate if we're married, or we accuse our parents, or we accuse our kids, or we excuse ourselves. Hey, what problem? I ain't got no problem. What you talking about? Accusing and excusing. First of all, we accuse others. We blame the other person. It's all your fault, Lydia. See, Adam took it like a man. He blamed Eve. Eve, it's your fault that I messed up. And then he accuses not only his wife, he accuses God. God, it's the wife you gave me. It's your fault that I'm a jerk. When Lydia and I first got married, I remember very well, I had a tendency of doing this. Lydia had a halo, so she didn't do it as much. But when her and I would get into an argument, and we'd be fussing around there, and I would be a jerk. I'd say something really, really dumb. I would do this deflecting thing where I'm being a jerk, but I would turn around and say, hey, if you would have done such and such, I would have done such and such. You're the reason why I'm a jerk. It's funny how about her mid to late 20s, she no longer took that anymore. Now she said, hey, dude, you got the issue. You deal with it. Accusing. And then the second thing, we excuse ourselves. It's not my problem. What are you talking about? I don't have an issue. 1 John 1:8 says this. If we claim we have no sin, we are only, say it with me, we are only fooling who? We're only fooling ourselves and refusing to accept the truth. He's saying that pretending is self-deception. It's self-deception. I'm only fooling myself, and I'm lying to myself when I pretend like I don't have issues, that I don't have a problem. So let me ask you. Let me ask me, what are we pretending is not a problem, an issue in our home, in our families? James, I'm not a workaholic. I'm not a worrywart. I'm not a perfectionist. What is it in our family that really we're kind of trying to fool ourselves? It's not really there. But here's the truth about pretending. Pretending only makes things worse. Have you noticed that? Pretending only makes things worse. So therefore, we must overcome the fear of our faults, our problems, our issues, and put them out there, be honest, and overcome them. The second fear that we have to overcome in our families is overcome my fear of my feelings. If I'm afraid of my feelings, what happens? I become distant. I become distant from my kids. I become distant from my wife. I become distant from other if I'm afraid of what I'm feeling inside. Genesis chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. God called to Adam, "Why are you hiding?" Adam answered, "I was" what? "I was afraid and hid from you because I was naked." See, here's the truth. Fear and hiding go together. There tends to, we put up these barriers between, if I'm feeling like I can't really be honest with Lydia with my feelings and what's happening inside of me, I will put up a firewall. There will be a barrier between us. We run for cover. So, a little confession this morning. Telling all of my faults today. That's awesome. So, when Lydia and I first got married, I was raised in the North, so I was very conservative, we don't express emotions well in the North. Lydia's raised in the South, and she is very expressive with emotions. And, she cries, she laughs, and it's all loud. And we get married, and because of my own brokenness inside, my upbringing, but also my own brokenness, I would do really dumb things when Lydia would cry. She'd start to cry, and to me, I seen that as manipulation. I saw that as, she's really trying to control the situation with her tears. Dumb boy, right? And so what I would do, I do really insensitive things, like really intelligent things, like when she'd break in, it's in the evening, she breaks down and cries, and right in the middle of it, I just remove myself. I go to bed and go to sleep. Yeah, don't throw stones at me. Hold on. I was broken. And so my number one tool for dealing with emotions and feelings that I didn't feel comfortable with, I would detach. I would remove myself, put up this firewall. And and that went on for a while in our marriage because I just couldn't engage at an emotional level with Lydia. And then in my 30s, I began to deal with my own pain, my inner pain, my own brokenness. I didn't know that I didn't know. I didn't know that I was broken. But once I went to a good Christian counselor, I began to work through and get honest about my feelings inside and what was broken in my childhood that created this idea that tears are weakness or tears is manipulation. All of a sudden, my heart began to get good and get healed and get well. Jesus began to heal my heart. And when I got my heart well, all of a sudden, I began to slowly engage Lydia on much more of an emotional level. And now fast forward 38 years, I cry more than she does. In fact, she would say, "Come on, suck it up, Buttercup. You got to do better than that." No, not really. She cries, we cry. But I really can engage her at an emotional level and not feel any kind of fear showing my emotions. Or not feeling like she's trying to do something with. So here's what I want you to understand. We have to get okay with and work through our issues so we can get okay with expressing our emotions in our heart, our feelings. So what are the feelings that frighten us? Here's a couple. What about hurt feelings? I don't know why this is, but we tend to not want to express when we get hurt. Instead of just saying, "Hey, dude, that hurt. That really hurt my feelings." It's not a big deal. We try to cover it up. But here's the problem with not expressing hurt feelings in our families. Here's what happens. If you don't verbalize the hurt, if you don't express it, and you begin to stuff it, that hurt feeling turns into resentment. And resentment is one of the number one killers of relationships. It goes something like this. Casey, our front row director here, she loves the Cowboys and the Dallas Cowboys, and she's deceived. She's it's really sad. Sad? It's the off season, and my brother down here has a Dallas Cowboys jersey on. I just don't get that. Anyways, let's just say Casey, because she loves the Cowboys, she knows I don't. She throws a big stone at me. Man, it hurts. But what do I do with that? I take this stone and I put it down in the sack. I don't throw it back, or I don't say, "Hey, that hurt." You love them Cowboys. That just really hurts me bad. And then the next day or next week, next Sunday, she throws another stone at me. Man, it hits me, and I'm like, oh, man. Inside, I'm going, that hurt. But I don't say anything to Casey. And then one day, you throw another one. Go ahead. All right. You throw that like the Cowboys toss a football. Boom, boom. Okay, so then one day, I come to church. She throws a little pebble at me, just a little, just boom. All this time I've been stuffing those stones inside of a sack and just stuffing it down, right? But all of a sudden, she throws this little bitty stone at me, and it hits me upside the head. And finally, I don't just say that hurts. Now I erupt. All of a sudden, I pick up that little pebble and I throw it at, bam! Take that, Casey. Love them Cowboys. And I pull down in my sack and I throw another one back at you, and another one back at you, and another one back at you, and another one back at you. Man, I'm feeling good. And while I'm on a roll, I start throwing stones that she didn't even throw at me. But it just feels good because I'm releasing, finally, all the stuff I've been carrying in my heavy sack. What we do when we stuff it down inside and we don't tell people when it hurts us, hurt, unverbalized, turns into resentment. And resentment then stones the person. When you finally let it go, you say it in a way that you just ought not to be saying it because it's going to destroy the relationship. So I have to overcome my fear of expressing that I've been hurt. Another feeling that frightens us sometimes is angry feelings. Now, you may recall that Adam and Eve had two sons. Remember the names? Cain and Abel. And Cain had a real anger problem. In fact, so much so that he killed his brother Abel. Killed him, murdered him. And so the question is, what did Abel say to Adam and Eve? He said, "It kills me how you're raising Cain." Some people could say that in their friendships, in their homes. It's killing me how you're raising Cain. In other words, it's killing me how you're processing your anger. Your anger is uncontrolled. Your anger's not channeled right. It's kind of like the stoning thing. You're just hurling this. The problem is a lot of people think, I should never get angry in my family because anger's not loving. Wrong. How many of you know that Jesus got angry? He did. Who gave you that emotion of anger? God did. The Bible says, be angry, but don't sin. Get angry, but don't sin. Channel it in the right way. Healthy, functional families are families who express anger the right way. And they keep short accounts, and they express, hey, that makes me angry. But then we move into forgiveness and reconciliation, and then we move on. Some other feelings that we deal with in our families that frighten us is sexual feelings. Sexual feelings scare us. Wow, I see those lights behind me. Oh, Jesus, have mercy. They didn't do that first service. So that surprised me. Thank you so much for that. In fact, I even say sex in church. Some of you are breaking out in a cold sweat right now. You're like, oh my God, he said sex in church. Hello, folks. I got news for you. When God created Adam and Eve, he gave them the plumbing. It wasn't that the devil did it. No, God gave Adam and Eve and the human race hormones. And aren't we glad? Can I get a witness, somebody? All the dudes, yeah, that's right. Truth is, God talks a lot about sex in the Bible. It really talks a lot and honest about sexuality. So it's really important in our homes that we talk to each other about our sexual feelings. If you're married, talk to your spouse about it regularly. If you have children, it is vital that you talk to your kids about their sexual feelings. And you better not be waiting until they're 12 or 13 years old to have that conversation. Not nowadays. You better start around 7 or 8 years old. Having the birds and the bees conversation and being honest. Because if you don't talk to them, they're going to learn it from the school system. Or they're going to learn it from their friends. Or even worse, they're going to learn it from the internet. And they're going to learn it the wrong way. So you got to have listen, in our family, when my boys were growing up, and we started young, but we talked honestly around the kitchen table about sex. And Lydia would get so embarrassed sometimes, she'd leave the table, go in the other room, say, I cannot hear no more of this. But we'd have the honest conversations. Why? Because you want to normalize it. And I wanted my sons growing up with an understanding that this is normal. It's not abnormal. This is a gift from God. So in our families, we really want to be honest about our sexual feelings. By the way, did you hear about when God told Adam and Eve, go populate the earth, and then he gave them a sex manual? Did you hear about that? You didn't hear about that? Well, let me tell you. God said, Adam, first of all, I want you to go kiss Eve. Adam said, yes, Lord, but what is a kiss? So the Lord gave him a brief description, it's how you do it. And then Adam took Eve up into their treehouse. A few minutes later, Adam emerged, said, thank you, Lord, that kiss was awesome. It doesn't get any better than this. God says, you want to bet? God says, now I want you to go and make love to your wife. Adam says, what does make love? God says, well, he gives some instructions. Here's the plumbing. Here's what you do. He goes back up to the treehouse where Eve is waiting for him, and he walks in. About as quick as he walks in, he walks back out. And he says, Lord, what's a headache? We need to be honest about all of our feelings in our families. Overcome our fears of our feelings and our faults. Y'all going to use that this week, aren't you? That's a good one. We're going to have healthy, functional families. The third thing is overcome my fear of losing my freedom. My freedom. See, what happens if we become fearful of losing our freedom in our families, in our relationships? We become demanding. I begin to demand that my rights be met. I become controlling. I demand that I have control in this relationship, that I get my own way. See, Adam and Eve dealt with this. Sin enters into the picture and begins to destroy the relationship of that first couple. And all of a sudden, because they become demanding, the battle of the sexes begin. And for the last 6,000 years, we have been having this battle of the sexes between men and women. Look at the result of their sin. This is what God said to Eve. Eve says, your yearning shall be for your husband. He will, say it with me, he will lord it over you. That was never God's intent. It was never God's intent for the husband or the man to dominate or to be lorded over his wife. It was, and for the last, all these thousands of years, you've got the battle of the sexes where, who's going to control what, who's going to dominate what, who's going to be, in the driver's seat in the relationship. It's not God's ideal. You see, our differences are not meant for us to compete with each other. Our differences are not to compete, but to complete each other. And that instead of trying to dominate and control each other with our differences and be demanding, no. We're supposed to honor each other. I remember with Lydia and I, when we first got married, there were two words that summarized our relationship for maybe the first decade. You know what it was? Power, struggle. Power, struggle. Because, well, frankly, it was more me than her. I was an overly controlling, I know that's hard for you to believe, but I was an overly controlling young man. Lydia, on the other hand, had a way of getting her way that was much more quiet, but much more deadly. If Lydia ever got quiet, that's not a good thing. Because she is passive-aggressive. She's like the sack full of stone thing, bah, bah, bah. And when it's not good. And she doesn't get mad, she gets even. Power struggle. It was a good day. It's a great day when Lydia and I stopped trying to fix the blame and started trying to fix the problem. I'm serious. We begin to change the focus from I got to have my way to how can I help you and serve you? How can I be like Jesus and wash your feet instead of me demanding you wash my feet? All of a sudden, we begin to serve each other in mutual submission, which the Bible teaches. That we are to love one another and submit to one another and work together and not demand our own way. And yeah, we still have relapses, especially her, but for the most part, it's good. After 38 years, we really work hard at serving each other. This fear of losing our freedom is behind what I consider to be the greatest fear in all of our society today, and that's the fear of commitment. I've never seen it like this before in my life. We're living in a culture where people are afraid to commit, to step over the line. So therefore, we have a lot of people, instead of getting married and committing to the covenant of marriage, they just live together. So last week I did some research on this, and I discovered that 65%, George Barner did a poll and discovered that 65% of Americans believe that cohabitation is a very good idea. Only 35% believe that it's not a good idea. The 65% disagree with the God of the Bible. The other 35%, no, we got to go back to what God says. Why? But then statistics prove out what I'm saying and what God is saying. 40% of all people living together break up within the first 16 months. People who live together before marriage have a far greater likelihood of divorcing than those who didn't live together at first. So listen, if you're living together here today, you're watching online, I'm not shaming you, I'm not trying to embarrass you. Here's what I am doing. I'm challenging you. Commit. Get married this week. Oh, no, James, we're going to get all this in order. We're going to get through college. Then we're going to get, no. Commit today. Get married today. Listen, the last time I gave, 2 times ago I gave this challenge exactly like this. That day we had 4 couples drive to Vegas and get married that day. That day. The last time I did it, the next week, we had over 30 weddings at New Life Church. 30. Just because I said, y'all living together, knock it off. Get married. Go get your license. Pastor Jim, come out. We got 26 pastors. We can do weddings this week. Commit. Dive in the deep end of the pool. So. That's good. Whatever it is, I want to be a part of that conversation. I'll talk to you after this service. All right. So if all of us deal with all of these fears in our families, how do we overcome them? It's wrapped up in one word. Here it is, honesty. Honesty is how we overcome these fears that we're talking about today. So jot this down. How do I overcome these fears? Be honest with myself. Be honest with myself. Proverbs 20:27 says, the Lord gave us a conscience. We cannot hide from ourselves. Listen, today, be honest with yourself about your faults, your feelings, about your fear of losing your freedom. Be honest, and because here's what we know. If you're honest with yourself and you pull out of self-deception or pretending or whatever it may be, this is what happens. God begins to bring healing into your mind and your heart, and you move into light instead of darkness. You get healed. Listen, everybody. The revealing of my feeling is the beginning of healing. When you begin to reveal to yourself, when I reveal what's in my heart, you're on the road to recovery. Be honest with God, with myself. Secondly, be honest with God. Be honest with God. You come to God and say, God, hey, by the way, He already knows. How many of you all know that God's a know-it-all? Now, I don't want to tell God what's really going on inside of me because, He might whack me in the head. He already knows, number one. Number two, He's not going to whack you on the head. Look at this next verse. 1 John 4:18. We have no need to fear someone who loves us perfectly. His perfect love for us eliminates all dread. Your loving Creator, your loving God wants you to come before Him and just be honest about the fears in your life, in your family, your relationships. And lastly, if you're married, be honest with your spouse. Be honest with my spouse. James 5:16. Admit your faults. your feelings, your feelings as well, your fears to one another, and pray for each other so that you may be what? So that you may be healed. Some of us need healing in our families, in our relationships, maybe with a spouse or a child, with a parent, a sibling. You need healing. The first step is just to get honest, to get real, and come to God with it. Now, you say, James, I don't have enough love inside me to do what you're talking about. You're right, and neither do I. How many of you know it takes God's love to heal our families, right? Look at the last verse. Let's read it together. Ready, go. Fully developed love expels every particle of fear, for fear always contains some of the torture of feeling guilty. Fully developed love. Do you need fully developed love? Do you need divine love? You get that from God, for God is love. Now, as we come to prayer, let me just tell you about me and Lydia. I'll wrap it up. So I've been real honest with you about our journey for 38 years. And we had to learn to be honest and learn to be confessional, to deal with the fears in our relationship. But the truth is, there's 4 or 5 times in our journey together, it had been easier to just not be honest about our struggles or our pains or our failures or our fears, whatever. It had been a lot easier just not to be honest. And we wouldn't be together today. That's the truth. But I'm so grateful that we didn't quit. We didn't give up. We did the hard work of talking to each other and going to a counselor along the way and talking to friends, and we learned how to process this stuff inside of us. And now today, this is the honest God truth, she is absolutely my best friend. At times, my worst enemy. But most of the time, she's my best friend. And I wish that for you. I wish that for your family. That your family would be filled with love, filled with honesty and authenticity, so that God's love can flow. You do that, you wait, you just watch. God's going to do things that you can't even dream of right now. Would you bow your heads? Would you close your eyes? Spirit of Jesus, I ask you to move in us. I ask you to touch our hearts, our lives.